Welcome to In the Spotlight. I'm Abigail Pogrubin. Elliott Abrams is the chairman of the Tikva Fund in New York and a board member of the Jewish People Policy Institute in Jerusalem, a senior fellow for Middle Eastern Studies at the Council on Foreign Relations in Washington, D.C. His career in foreign policy includes working for late Senators Henry M. Scoop Jackson and Daniel P. Moynihan, serving as an Assistant Secretary of State in the Reagan administration, and handling relations with Israel as a Deputy National Security Advisor in the George W. Bush administration. He is the author of 5 books. The most recent, which we are going to talk about today, is called If You Will It: Rebuilding Jewish Peoplehood for the 21st Century. It was published in October 2024. Welcome to the broadcast, Mr. Abrams. Thank you for letting me call you Elliott.
Yeah, thanks very much.
So am I right that this came out on October 8th was the official pub date?
That's right. Not by accident.
Right, not by accident. So let's just start with the subtitle, Rebuilding Jewish Peoplehood. What was dismantled?
Well, I think if you look at a lot of the statistics, and the ones that I use most in the book are the Jewish Americans in 2020 study by the Pew Research Center, you see what I'd call an erosion or a fraying of the Jewish community in the United States. There's a lot of ways of looking at it. I mean, just to give you a number, of the people in the United States, American Jews, raised Jewish, raised by one or two Jewish parents, a third no longer identify as Jewish. I mean, that's a definition of loss or erosion. I just give you one more. There's 2.4 million children in the United States who are being raised by one or two Jewish parents. And of those, half are being raised exclusively Jewish. The others are being raised as nothing, or as Jewish and Christian, or as Christian. Half are being raised as exclusively Jewish. So it's those kinds of numbers that led me to say, there is a problem here of maintaining the sense of community, of identity, of peoplehood for the next generations.
And that erosion, I know there's like many factors that you talk about in the book, but can you just give us, sort of your top 3, or what are the things you think we should be paying most attention to in terms of what's caused this?
Well, the first one I think is, you might say, the great open American society. That is, it is possible to assimilate in the United States. It's possible to marry someone who isn't Jewish. It's possible just to say, I'm not going to raise my kids as Jews, to live in a neighborhood where there are no Jews. Disaffiliation is very easy. So in a way, it's the greatness of America's open society, and the impact on a tiny community, about 2% of the American population, can be pretty tough. Add to that the non-Orthodox intermarriage rate, that is for non-Orthodox Jews, is now well over 70%, 70. So again, I mean, it's America. People can marry who they want. The kind of anti-Semitism that led Christians to not wish to marry Jews, say 100 years ago or 75 years ago, is also gone, and that's a very good thing. But we do know from the statistics that in intermarried families, the Jewish identity of the children is most often not very strong.
And I'm sure you've heard there are people who say we've been wringing our hands over continuity for as long as the Jewish people have been in existence. What is the kind of 5-alarm fire now? Like, do you feel like this is a different inflection point?
Yeah, I think it is. I mean, I wrote a book about the American Jewish community in the 90s. And in the 1990 National Jewish Population Survey, a horrible, amazing, astonishing figure came out that gave rise to 1,000 articles in Jewish publications. The intermarriage rate among non-Orthodox Jews was 52%. Now it's gone up about 20, 25 points. That's just one way of measuring. The other numbers I gave, I think, are others. And what it shows is that a lot of people, let me put it this way, with Jewish heritage, whose grandparents, maybe four, maybe two, are simply disaffiliating. They're being lost to the American Jewish community.
And let's kind of go to the heart of this. I mean, we have these numbers, they're sobering, but there's something deep that's at stake. And I would love you to try to articulate that, and maybe as personally as you're willing to. Why does this matter so much?
Well, it's funny. I mean, if you don't think it matters, I guess I would say I wouldn't try to.
I do.
Yes, no, I know. I mean, if there is a person, Jewish or Christian,
right,
who says, well, I don't particularly care about that, it just doesn't mean anything to me, I don't think you can argue someone into thinking it cares. You can make the argument, you are, for a Jew, you are the heir to 2,000 or 3,000 years, hundreds of generations of Jews. Is it really going to stop with you? But if the person says, well, I guess so, then, you're lost. For me, it's important. For many American Jews, when they're asked, is it very important to you that your grandchildren be Jewish? I have the number here. 45% of those who say they are Jews by religion, that is not just by heritage, background, by religion, 45% say it's, quote, very important to them that their grandchildren be Jewish. So majority, it's not very important. To me, it's very important. I maybe it's the way I was raised, but it's been meaningful to me throughout my life. And I meet many American Jews who ask the question, well, if it is meaningful to me, and they are people with children or grandchildren, what do we do about it? Is there anything that can be done? And in a sense, the book is an effort to answer that question.
And before we get to some of the what do we do about it, can you just give us a little bit of a sense of your Jewish bio, how you were raised, with how much Jewish education and observance?
I was raised in New York City, in Queens, in what I'd call a middle class, upper middle class Jewish family. We had a kosher home, mostly so that my grandparents could eat in our home. We were not kosher outside the home. We belonged to a synagogue. My brother and I were bar mitzvahed. I went to Hebrew school. I did not go to a Jewish day school. My Jewish education, formal education, stopped very quickly after my bar mitzvah. So in a way, anything I know came in college, or mostly really after college. I belong to a conservative synagogue where I go occasionally, but do not go weekly.
And what about as a learner? Do you study Torah? Have you ever been in a chavruta?
No, in no kind of organized or formal sense. What it's just been is, it's been a long time since college, and it's just been an accumulation of Jewish books, and it's really been more reading, self-study than anything else. Then, of course, writing these books, you end up interviewing a large number of people, and I've learned a lot from talking to scholars and rabbis, Jewish principals.
And what about your connection to Israel? Like, when did that really solidify?
I went to Israel for the first time when I was 21 years old. That is, my parents never took us to Israel. And I was not involved in any serious professional way until it was really not the Reagan administration, it was the Bush administration. So I'd been to Israel 3 or 4 times by the time I was 50. And in the last 20 years, I've been to Israel about 75 or 80 times. So it came later in life.
And let's just start with some of I don't want to call them, solutions, because, no one thing is going to change this tide. But let's start with Israel, because you feel strongly that trips to Israel are crucial.
Yeah.
Aside from just the obvious that it's a powerful place to go, what makes you think this is a game changer if more young people went?
Well, again, we're talking about peoplehood here. We're not talking about religion in the formal sense. We're really talking about the non-Orthodox community. I think we have data on this, for one thing. Birthright is now 20 years old, and there have been a lot of very good studies of birthright, many done by Professor Leonard Sachs and his team at Brandeis. It's 10 days. I mean, birthright is now many more things. But it began as 10 days, which is nothing. And it has been life-changing for something like a third or 40% of those who went on that trip. 10 days. So what I argue in the book is when Natan Sharansky argues for a gap year in Israel, when we talk about a summer-long, 4 weeks, 8 weeks teen tour of Israel, a high school semester in Israel, junior year abroad in Israel, it's pretty obvious that the impact is going to be much greater. When an American Jewish kid who's 20, let's say, college student, meets an Israeli of the same age who is not playing ultimate frisbee or rooting for the college football team, he or she is risking his or her life for their country in the army. I think that can be a very powerful experience. And I think for American Jews to spend more than 10 days, to spend real time in Israel, there's also the question of learning Hebrew, but just to spend time in Israel, to get that feeling, I belong here. These are also my people. I think it doesn't happen to everybody, but statistically speaking, I think we can show that it works.
You say in the book the percentage of American Jews who have ever been to Israel once is 45%. That's way low compared to other diaspora communities, British, French, Australian, Canadian. It feels like it's big numbers who have gone, but you're saying it's kind of a drop in the bucket.
No, I think that's right. First, again, compared to Jews in other Western countries, where and it's not distance because the Australians are pretty far from Israel. Something like 80% of them have gone, and many of those Jews, that 45% have gone, but 55 have never gone. Many of them have been abroad. It's not as if they've never had a passport, they've never traveled. They haven't been interested enough to go, or they have not taken their children. So I think it's a pretty, and remember, that 45% includes several 100,000 who over the last 20 years have gone through birthright. Yet even with birthright, it's fewer than half. I think it's a pretty bad number.
And how do you respond? I can imagine how you respond to the pressures now on some students not to go, that they're even just taking a trip is somehow tainting in terms of their moral clarity, even to take the trip. I can speak just from personal experience without naming schools. So how do you think that students should withstand that social pressure, not even to engage the country?
Well, first, there's only one good study I know of this year, that is 2024, since October 7th, of Jews on campuses in this context, and it's by Eitan Hirsch at Tufts. And what he finds is that the students of what he calls high Jewish background, have you family belong to a synagogue? Have you been bar mitzvah? Have you ever been to Israel? Etc. Actually react to that challenge and those pressures very positively. They are the student activists, and the students of what he calls low Jewish background, who answer no to all those questions, they just kind of pull back or walk away. So one thing is, before students get to campus, then it's really a matter for their parents, for their families, to give them the background that they're going to need to face this. But I'd give another answer in addition. If the social pressures are that intense, you shouldn't be on that campus. If the people who run that campus, the president, the board of governors, the provost, the faculty, if they don't give a damn, if they're actually on the other side and think, they're indifferent to the experience of a Jewish student on that campus, those are the kinds of schools that I think Jews in America should start turning away from. Why do you want to go to a place where you're going to be in battle for 4 years?
But is that not capitulating, Elliott, to say, you know what, I'm not going?
I don't think. Yeah, it's not capitulating. I think it's saying, you don't want me, I don't want you. There are other places in America to get a high quality education than campuses that are hostile to Jews. Now, I think it's pretty obvious that many Jewish students are going to try to go to the schools with the highest prestige levels. And if they do go to those schools, they and donors and parents should fight. I mean, I'm not suggesting that the people at those schools should all stand up and say, we're leaving tomorrow. But many of the college administrations, I went to Harvard, and I'm ashamed of what's happened at Harvard. I think it's repellent. And I think there should be a tougher fight. I'm glad there's a legal fight. And I think there should be a donors fight and a parents fight, because otherwise it will never change.
And how do you advise a young person in terms of how to talk about this political moment? The political moment in Israel and even here, where some of the divisions are clearly different, but there are still such real fissures. Do you have I know it's a big question, but advice as to how to many are opting out, as you say, because it's overwhelming and they feel like I have to marshal these talking points. I have to be a soldier for Israel. I want to live my life. I want to have my social life. I want to learn. I want to, do whatever my extracurriculars are, whether you're in high school or college or even, in just recent graduate, there suddenly seems to be a different onus on Jewish identity.
Well, if you have friends, I use the term loosely, who think that being a Zionist is a crime and supporting Israel makes you someone that they don't want to affiliate with, associate with, be friends with, they've made a choice for you. And that isn't somebody you really should want to spend your time with. That's a person with a closed mind and a lot of hostility to Jews. I would say what you ought to do is, for one thing, learn. And that may mean going to Israel, because I think it helps if you can say, hold it, that's just not true. I was there last semester. I spent the whole summer there, whatever it is, because the people who are making those accusations most often will not have had that experience. The other thing to learn is to learn about Israeli history, American Jewish history. Take a line from Bill Clinton. I mean, Bill Clinton recently in an interview noted that he finds college students today have no idea what happened at Camp David, have no idea of the peace that was offered the Palestinians under Arafat and turned down, have no idea if they've heard about it vaguely, what exactly was offered and rejected. That's from Bill Clinton. So I think there's a lot that Jewish college students don't know that would be useful to them in these arguments. But there are a number of people on the other side who are not going to be swayed by arguments. Some of them are on the faculty, which is the most unfortunate, or in the administrations of these schools. And their minds cannot be changed. So you either fight it, or again, if you're a high school student thinking about it now, is that really the place you want to go to? There are alternatives.
So when you wrote this book, obviously anti-Semitism was already on the rise, but now it's exploded, and post-October 7th. And I just wonder what in the book is different through that lens, or how would you say it's, even more maybe apropos?
Well, there's a question now that wouldn't have been raised 5 years ago. The American Jewish community at one time, to pick a year, 100 years ago, 75 years ago, maintained a sense of community and peoplehood and Jewish identity, in part because of Christians, because of centripetal pressures, anti-Semitism, No, you have to live in a Jewish neighborhood. You can't live in that neighborhood, can't go to that club, can't go to that hotel. That's gone. And 5 years ago, I think we all would have said, well, anti-Semitism is not a factor. Today, the question is, how large a factor? What kind of factor will it be in the American Jewish community going forward? As recently as a couple of years ago, the most anti-Semitic attacks, physical attacks on people, were on people who were identifiably Jewish in the sense of being Orthodox or even Hasidic. They were identifiable as Jewish, from 100 feet away. That is no longer true on many campuses. So now you have to cope with the question, and the book raises the question, will anti-Semitism rise to the level in the United States where, oddly enough, and not in a way we would ever want, it will contribute to a sense of Jewish identity? I would say that in France, in England, in Australia, and we're beginning to see it in Canada now, the anti-Semitism is rising publicly, violently, to the level where it is really affecting the Jewish community. I don't know if we're going to get there in the United States. We may be at a peak level right now. It may be that if there's a ceasefire in Gaza, for example, that by 1 year from today, the level of anti-Semitism generally in public and on campus has begun to subside.
So we're running out of time, but I want to make sure I touch on day schools and camp. It's Jewish
Right.
camp, because that's
Right.
clearly two of the tent poles you feel most strongly about. Can you
Yes.
just say a quick word?
Yeah, a quick word. People tend to view summer camp as nice, but trivial. It isn't. And again, there's data on this, because Jewish sleepaway camp is, for many American Jewish kids, the only time they get a truly immersive Jewish experience, living as a Jew among Jews. These are kids who generally don't go to day school. So it can be critical to the formation of Jewish identity. Talk to many Jewish professionals, that is, in Jewish organizations. They were counselors in Jewish sleepaway camps. Education, obviously, is critical. The American Jewish community is one of the best educated ever in secular terms, but not in Jewish terms. We can do better. The Hebrew school model that's been around for 100 years, where every synagogue has a Hebrew, non-Orthodox synagogue, Reform conservative has a Hebrew school, kids go until bat mitzvah or bar mitzvah, they tend to drift away, they tend to learn very little. It hasn't worked, it never worked, it isn't working. So either we need to improve the number of kids who have at least some years in day school, or we need to improve and build alternatives to this failed model of synagogue Hebrew schools, maybe more collective activities that go beyond one synagogue. But we really have to do better educationally.
And I want Elliott just to give you a chance to say, there are a lot of bright spots that I see in the Jewish community. Things that are startups, synagogues that are robust, day schools that are new. There's new independent minyanim. People are reinventing Judaism all the time in really powerful, potent ways. So I just want to make sure I understand that you're not describing yes. just kind of a lachrymose landscape here, or are you?
No, well, I would say that if nothing is done, then the trends are bad. The title of the book, taken from Herzl, of course, was If You Will It, because if we want to do better, we can. There are all those efforts that you mentioned. There are a lot of new Jewish philanthropic activities. There are new schools. The Tikva Fund has just opened a school, Emmett, in Manhattan. We can do this. It is not beyond the American Jewish community to continue down that path of invention, to do better financially, because if we want more kids to be able to go to summer camp, who'd like to go, or might want to do day school, maybe only elementary school, but it will take more money. We have the talent, we have the energy, we have the money to do this. So if we will it, it's going to happen.
And I'm going to end with that quote, the way you end the book, or at least in your conclusion. You say, what we need to do isn't impossible, and the obstacles can all be overcome. That's why I took the title of this book from Theodore Herzl, If You Will It, It Is No Dream. And if you don't, a dream it is, and a dream it will stay. And then you say, we can do better than dreams. I just want to really push you on the optimism. Like, what makes you think it can't just be money from the same people and energy from the same people? It feels like there needs to be a different kind of groundswell to accomplish what you are suggesting.
That's probably right. And I don't think we can feel confident that we're going to turn around some of these trends. The ability to do it is clearly there. And it's going to depend, I think, on the generation of Jews who are now roughly between 30 and 60, who are inheriting money from their parents, who are engaged somehow in the Jewish community through children, through grandchildren, through their own activities, philanthropic, religious. It's really possible to do this. And I am optimistic. I am not confident.
Thank you, Elliott Abrams. The book is If You Will It, Rebuilding Jewish Peoplehood for the 21st Century. Thank you for being with us. And for those who are watching in real time, happy Hanukkah. I'm Abigail Pogrebin, and this is In the Spotlight. I'll see you next time.